You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Welcome to another amazing episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. Before we get into today's show, I want to tell you guys about our newsletter. Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and hit the button that says Newsletter Sign Up. By doing this, you will never miss out on another episode. Be the first one to hear it when we send it out to your inbox each week. If you want even more, click on Justin Health link to go straight to Dr. Justin's page and get direct access to the doctor. Having any thyroid issues? Well, we've got your back. Hit the link that says Fix Your Thyroid, and by signing up to the newsletter, you'll get a video series on how to do just that. So how's it going today, Dr. Justin?
Hey, Barris, it's going great. Today's a nice little Monday here in Austin. The weather's great. Woke up this morning, did some sprinting, some visualization, some affirmations, got my metabolism revved up, and I'm ready to go here. How are you doing?
Oh, doing well. I like that we're doing a Monday show. We usually always do our shows and record them on Fridays, but today's Monday, so a nice change of pace. But yeah, it's going really well this morning, and it's also nice and sunny outside too for me. It's almost kind of glaring in my eyes as I look into the computer, but no, like I couldn't be mad. So in today's show, we wanted to kind of give everybody an overview of a natural support for weight loss, and that's probably the biggest reason why people even consider being healthy in the first place is because they need to lose weight. Or maybe they don't necessarily need to lose weight, but they want to feel better. They want to have that peace of mind when it comes to their physical physique. And that kickstarts the journey to finding natural ways of getting weight loss. And the way that we do it here is a holistic view. So we're not just going to tell you, hey, you just got to exercise more and stop being lazy, because that just kind of reaffirms that you're being lazy. And we know that everyone who really wants to lose weight tries real hard, but maybe they're just not given the right information. So we're here today to help you guys with that. So I know Dr. Justin's excited about this, and he has worked with many clients that have had weight issues and been very successful at helping them. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, when we deal with people with weight issues, there's a couple of different underlying causes, and we have to look at the weight as being a symptom that the body's systems aren't working, right? Basically, when we see extra weight storage, right, we want to always differentiate that between fat and muscle, because when we're trying to lose weight, we're really trying to lose fat. That's really our goal. And as people become more anti-inflammatory, we're lessening the inflammation, we're lessening the natural breakdown of the body. We want to work on, or that natural shift will drive putting muscle on, especially if we're doing the right kinds of exercise. So one of the first things we see is when we're reducing inflammation is we're seeing fat reduction, but we're also seeing a lot of fluid reduction. Again, inflammation drives extracellular fluid loss. The fluid outside of the cell becomes reduced. I mean, think about it. If you bump your head or get a black eye, it swells up. That's inflammation. And that's part of a lot of what's happening with a lot of people that are overweight. They're inflamed. They're holding on to more fluid, right? You see their face looks very rounded. You can see some women or even men may have cankles, where you can't really even see the ankle joint. You're going to see fat deposits in certain areas of the body. So depending on how the fat deposits can tell us what hormones are off. So I'll just give you a second there, Barris, to follow up on that.
Yeah, definitely. So one big thing that I'm hearing underlyingly is that we want to get our body more in a state of balance between being anabolic and being catabolic. And it's funny because we seem to only want to break down. And we say, well, hey, look, you're too big. You need to break down all this fat, so you need to run more. But what I hear that you're saying is, hey, you're pretty broken down. I can see what you need is to eat better, not more, and maybe you might actually have to eat more if you have a lot of, broken parts. You need to sleep better. You need to exercise better, not necessarily more because you want to recover more. You want to those are the things that you might need more of, and that's what I'm hearing. So, and you mentioned inflammation kind of being that main signifier to weight loss, and I'm pretty sure that you've been able to, without trying sometimes, probably change someone's diet because of some kind of infection, and maybe all of a sudden they lost weight as a byproduct of that, or maybe they had a chiropractic adjustment and they were holding on so much stress somewhere that they were gaining weight. And not saying that cracking someone's bones is the cure all, but maybe for certain people they might be holding so much stress and inflammation somewhere that they might hold on extra weight. So let's dive more into the inflammation portion. What are yeah, go ahead. I feel like you already know my question before I ask it.
Yeah, so when we look at inflammation, fat cells are almost one of the number one producers of inflammation, right? One of the things we can do by just getting rid of fat cells, we decrease specific interleukins that are actually produced by the fat cells. That's number one. That's one of the most important things. And number two is fat cells are the largest producer of estrogen. So as a man, estrogen is going to destroy the feedback loop that produces testosterone. We have this LH, this luteinizing hormone feedback loop. That's going to get all messed up if we're over-secreting estrogen from our fat cells. So just by working on and doing things to reduce our fat cells is going to be huge to reduce inflammation in general. So then we always have to ask, well, what's driving fat gain, right? And Diana Schwarzwein, she's a endocrinologist out of the LA, Santa Barbara area. She has a great quote that I've used my whole career, which is, you get healthy, then you lose weight. You don't lose weight to get healthy. So we always want to have the causal in sequential terms, meaning the causal element is getting healthy. And then what does that mean? That's really up basically to you and your functional medicine doctor to look at what body systems aren't working. So most of my patients are inflamed. So the first thing we can do is we can just stop inflammation by working on sleep. We can stop inflammation by dialing in blood sugar, right? We can work on inflammation by cutting out food allergens. Right? We can cut out inflammation by adding in extra anti-inflammatory support like fish and grass-fed meat. These are all things that can help knock down the inflammation. And then from there, it's just a matter of looking at what other body systems are damaged. Again, females tend to be a little bit harder because they have about 90%, I should say, men have about 50% of their fat tends to come from fluid, from intercellular, just water, where women it's only 10%. So they have a lot more fat gain they have to work on than men, so they don't quite get that rapid gain. And a lot of women get discouraged because they see their husband or they see their significant other or a friend who's male lose weight really fast, and you may not see that in females because of the intricate hormonal balance. And a lot of women, they're estrogen dominant, so the estrogen dominance basically becomes a way in which their fats kind of lock down, if you will. So estrogen dominance is nothing more than having your estrogen to progesterone ratio typically on normal about 23 to 25 times more progesterone to estrogen. So once we start going below 20 times, we have 20 times progesterone to estrogen, 10 times, 15 times. Once we start dropping beneath 20, we're starting to become progressively more estrogen dominant, and it becomes harder to lose the weight.
Definitely. One thing that I wanted to bring up, because I know this is something that you might find people struggling with, and it depends on their level of how much high quality vegetables or food that they're eating. Because when you start eating real food, you start to get a lot of the water and kind of let go of things that you don't need. I find a lot of my clients personally have, I'm not saying any names, you guys, so don't get embarrassed. They don't know who you are, but they might have like constipation issues because their body's like trying to hold on to every little bit of water that they have. Their cells are dying for nourishment, and the best thing we can do is give ourselves clean water. A lot of people their water's not actually even clean. And how could making sure that we have a diet fresh in whole foods, because a lot of the fake foods that we have now are so void of nourishment, but also like even hydration. Um, how could simply hydrating correctly help with losing weight?
Well, again, the solution to pollution is dilution, says Dr. Robert Rakowski. We had him on the show here a couple weeks ago. Essentially, our fat cells tend to be a toxic reserve because a lot of toxins in our environment are fat soluble. So as we start running phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, these are our cytochrome P450 oxidase pathways. I know, big Jeopardy word there. They're just certain enzymes that get run that take our fat and start turning it into water-soluble toxins, and then we excrete it via the skin, via the lymph, via the stool, via the urine. So we want to make sure these pathways are upregulated. And again, amino acids, primarily sulfur-based amino acids, run these pathways. So if we don't have the extra detoxification support and the extra sulfur, and we don't have adequate digestion of these amino acids because we're on a proton pump inhibitor, or we have all kinds of digestive issues, well, we're not going to be able to run our detoxification pathways appropriately. And again, there's many studies that we release a lot of interleukins and inflammatory cytokines due to fat loss. So we want to make sure, if there's stubborn fat loss, that we are supporting detoxification. So I always recommend a good organic acid test with my patients, especially when we're struggling with fat loss, because we can see how the various detoxification pathways are running. And that's super important so we can get specific in supporting this reduction.
Definitely. Now, I don't want to get all conspiracy theory over here. I mean, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's just, just where money goes, and people don't want to waste money that have a lot of money. But the fluoride in our water probably isn't helping those or just most tap water. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's cleaner than, dirty water, but should we make sure that we're filtering our water or getting a fresh source of water? And because if our bodies are 70% water, wouldn't it be wise to make sure that our cells are getting fresh water, maybe even with like a pinch of like some sea salt in it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great book out there called Your Body's Many Cries for Waters by Dr. Batman Gilish. They call him Dr. Batman for short. But he lectured about drinking about half your body weight in water. Half your body weight in ounces of water. So if you I weigh 200 pounds, I would drink roughly about 100 ounces of water a day. And this is helpful because it's going to dilute the toxin. It's going to dilute these toxins. So if you have, let's say you have some cranberry juice in a jar, right? It's bright red. We just start adding a little bit of water to it. You notice the color of that cranberry juice lessens, right? The potency, the taste of it lessens. It's the same thing with toxins, folks. When we put water in the system, it's going to basically decrease the toxicity. But also, our blood is primarily water-based. So you want good, clean blood that's allowing to flush these toxins out. We need good, clean water there to provide some of the building blocks for blood and just diluting a lot of these toxins down. But if we don't have the amino acids in place to help run these pathways, then we're still not going to be able to flush them out. So one of the great things is running an organic acid test, and we can look at 2-methylhyperate, orotate, glucarate, alpha-hydroxybutyrate, pyroglutamate, sulfate. These are just markers for sulfur amino acids. And basically, just to kind of recap, we have phase 1 detoxification, and my analogy that I give patients is it's like taking an apple core or maybe some orange rinds and throwing it down the garbage disposal. We're taking that solid plant matter and we're grinding it up. That's phase 1. We're taking something that's solid or fat soluble and we're making it water soluble. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is we got to turn on that water and flush it out. Anyone knows if they just put their plant matter, their apple cores and their orange rinds in there and just let them sit after they grind it up and they walk away for a few hours, what happens when you turn the water on a few hours later?
Oh man, you got flies flying out of there.
You got flies, but not only that, it tends to congeal and becomes more solid, and it actually clogs up.
Oh yeah,
drain,
it gets
right?
it gets all sticky.
Yeah, it clogs
it gets
up.
stuck.
So when you grind it up, you want to be running that water so it can flush out right away, right while it gets liquefied. You don't want to give it a chance to congeal. So we're flushing it out. That's phase 2. And phase 2 involves all of these different amino acids, from methionine to all your sulfur compounds like N-acetylcysteine. We can use some taurine there, some SAMe. Go ahead.
And let me ask you real quick too, because I know some people. I've had some people on the internet almost kind of say like, oh, it's a big myth out there. They're saying, oh, toxins. They're always talking about toxins, and how are toxins associated with fat loss? It's about calories. It's about calories. It's not toxins. And then, but my question is, and because people say, oh, well, prove it. So these are markers that actually test that your body's eliminating those toxins correctly. This is proof right there. There's scientific proof that they want to hear.
Well, I mean, you have to understand first, right, when people are talking about this, what toxins are we talking about? Because the majority of toxins that are out there are xenoestrogens, right? Fluoride, right? Fluoride, the compound in our water is xenoestrogenic, right? Our pesticides are xenoestrogenic. Xeno means foreign, estrogen means the hormone estrogen. Pesticides are xenoestrogenic. The hormones in our meats are xenoestrogenic. The GMOs are going to have some xenoestrogen compounds to it. Also, let's see here. We talked. Oh, the plastics that we're storing our food in are going to be xenoestrogenic. So, estrogens have a fat storage-like effect, and that's part of the reason why women are so estrogenic. This balance of progesterone is dropping because our environment is estrogenic. Just go Google the documentary The Disappearing Male, and they talk about why the male population has been dropping, and a lot of it has to do with the xenoestrogens. Go look at the 2000 study in, I think, the animal journal, the Journal of Reproductive Endocrinology. They did a study looking at alligators in the Everglades, and they wanted to see why the reproductive population was dropping. Now, what they found was the women alligators didn't want to mate with the male alligators, and they pulled some of the male alligators up, and they measured their reproductive anatomy, i.e. their penis, and they found significant, they in the journal they talked about it, abnormal reproductive anatomy growth. What they meant to say was the male alligators' penises significantly shrunk in size. And the female alligators, they didn't want to mate with them. But what they really found was the deeper underlying cause was the reason why there was major shrinkage in the reproductive anatomy department was because their estrogen levels were off the chart. They ran blood samples of the male alligators, and they found their estrogen levels were the same. They were comparable to their female counterparts.
Wow. Yeah, that's big.
That's huge. And anytime, real simple marker for estrogen, go look at any person that has gynecomastia, or man boobs, if you will, any abnormal fatty tissue in the chest, that's estrogen right there. And getting an estrogen detox done, really upping a lot of these higher dose sulfur amino acids and cutting out all of the potential sources for your diet where these things could be in, right? Don't drink out of plastic water bottles. Don't put your food in plastics. Plastics are okay at cooler temperatures, but once you start getting warmer, it's going to leach out. Get Pyrex, right? Get your good clean canteen. Avoid all pesticides and chemicals. These things are paramount. And get a good high-quality water filter. I have a whole house water filter, and I also have an under-the-counter water filter from my sink that filters it twice, and it reinfuses minerals back in. So I filter my water out twice, one systemically and one right at the source. So these are really important things that we can do to help promote weight loss, is just get the estrogens out of our diet.
And for someone who, like a male who maybe already has some like gynecomastia issues, maybe has doesn't have enough aromatase or has an inhibition, what are some of the things that you might advise that person to do? So, besides what we just mentioned, like the removal of that, like what can they add in to help?
So a couple of things that we can add in is we can add concentrated amounts of the cruciferous family. The cruciferous family is high in compounds called diindolylmethane or indole-3 carbinol. These are basically sulfur-based amino acids that will help with detoxification. Maybe not amino acids, they're more compounds, but they're more detoxifying estrogenic compounds. These are really, really helpful. I would just work on getting your protein levels up using a high-quality protein support product that has sulfur amino acids in it that helps run your phase 2 pathways. Even add in tonifying herbs that will help support your liver as well, like milk thistle and artichoke extract, turmeric and dandelion and fringe tree, really making sure your digestion's working, because again, a lot of these toxins come out of the liver into the gallbladder, and the gallbladder gets released when we eat fat. So eating good clean fats is also like a stimulus. You can imagine it as like a stimulus for changing the oil, and imagine that oil getting all mucked up with estrogens. If we don't have good clean fats in our diet, and fats tend to concentrate toxins, we want to make sure we're eating fats, if we're doing it ideally from like grass-fed meat or good organic sources, because they'll be higher in toxins. So good clean fats will stimulate the gallbladder to release bile, which will then have a lot of our nasty stuff in it and a lot of our nasty estrogens. And if we have good digestion, we can poop out a lot of those estrogens. And if we support it with some of those products I mentioned, we'll be able to excrete a lot of those estrogens as well, and they won't have as much of an effect on stimulating our fat growth.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things that I was thinking of was, because you mentioned like the gallbladder. I know like even working with a professional, it could be beneficial. I wouldn't just advise someone possibly doing this on their own, unless they have really a lot of experience with the natural health. But like even a gallbladder flush and kind of trying to jumpstart that car from being like, really broken to getting back into things. But you mentioned eating good fats, and I know even during this flush, you drink a certain amount of olive oil, or even if you have too much MCT, you almost have like this purge of like you got to get rid of all this bad stuff, and it kind of pushes things out a little quicker, which is somewhat uncomfortable for people to go through. People like to get eased into it. But I know one fat specifically that is very beneficial at helping people burn fat. It's a fat, people often say it's a fat that burns fat. And CLA. And a lot of people supplement with this, and they spend a lot of money on supplements. But I know that there's certain food items that if you get it from the right source, you can get a lot of CLA into your diet naturally. So could you mention how we can get some more CLA, which is a fat that helps us burn fat, through our diet?
Yeah, absolutely. So CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, is going to be found in high amounts of grass-fed meat. So getting good quality grass-fed meat in your diet is going to be important. You're even going to have it in grass-fed butter. And this is kind of the whole idea of putting good quality MCT oil and butter in your coffee. And again, things like MCT and coconut oil, they don't typically stimulate as much of a gallbladder release because they don't require enterohepatic uptake, meaning they don't require bile salts to break them down as much. So again, the biggest problem with a lot of these gallbladder flushes is if you have a gallstone in there and you do this whole grapefruit or apple juice with the whole olive oil and kind of gig, you're going to really stimulate your gallbladder to seriously contract. And if there's a gallstone in there, you can create significant inflammation. It's like, imagine you have a porcupine, a little baby porcupine in your hand. If you start squeezing that porcupine tight, well, those quills are going to dig into your fingers and puncture them and potentially draw blood. Well, it's the same thing with your gallbladder, because your gallbladder will contract in order to spit out bile salts into your duodenum, into the first part of your small intestine, to break down fat. And if there's some little porcupine hiding in that gallbladder, it's going to squeeze down on it, and it's going to create inflammation. And you'll get something called cholecystitis, where there's an inflamed gallbladder, and 9 times out of 10, conventional medicine is going to want to take it out. And that's not the right move.
That's not the right move.
You're forever altering digestion. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I said, unless you've done it before or you're already in the health space and you live in Santa Cruz or Berkeley and you invented the method, make sure that you're working with a functional medicine doctor who is the one advising you to do that, or thinks that, that would be a good step for you. Just because I know some people, they see like a blog, might write it down, and they're like, okay, they put the recipe out, and it's like, it's not just supposed to be out there for like that. It's more supposed to be used therapeutically, and there's a appropriate time and place to do it. And you should be guided by someone who knows how to do it and what they're talking about.
Exactly. So regarding with that, get the diet kind of dialed in first, right? Make sure you're digesting foods properly, making sure you're having a good bowel movement every day, at least 12 inches of stool every day. Make sure you're breaking down your food. That's the first thought, because if we're not breaking our food down and excreting it in the toilet, well, we're going to be reabsorbing a lot of those toxins, and that could include the estrogen. So increase the water, make sure we're getting the sulfur amino acids on board, and that can come from high-quality animal meats, whey protein, collagen. These are all really good sources of sulfur amino acids. I use specific supplements that are high in sulfur amino acids as well, so we want to supplement on top of them. So these are really important. And that's going to significantly reduce body fat, and that's going to help your body excrete a lot of these toxins off the bat for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about water, about some basic food items. We want to make sure that we're eating anti-inflammatory diet. We mentioned that a lot here, and being more anabolic. But let's dive a little bit into the some of the supplements that you think would be beneficial for someone. To what would be maybe some of the basic supplements that you would do if you were using or trying to look to lose some fat?
Well, let me just go back just one step here. There's an important hormone we forgot to talk about, and that is insulin.
Leptin? Or insulin, yeah.
Leptin's important. I just think of insulin as the first domino that's going to then respond by producing leptin. So if we have insulin resistance, we're going to have leptin resistance. So a lot of people like Jack Kruse and them, they really focus on leptin. I don't focus on it because I'm the 80-20 guy, right? What's the 20% that produces the 80% of the result? So I see leptin as being a byproduct of insulin. So if we kind of dial insulin sensitivity, we're going to essentially dial in leptin sensitivity 80 to 90% of the time. So insulin is an anabolic hormone. It's going to signal your muscles and your fat cells to pull up nutrients. Now this is important. We need that. That's why type 1 diabetics waste away. Just Google image type 1 diabetics before insulin therapy, I think in the 60s or 50s, maybe it's the 20s, was created. Type 1 diabetics lived till like the age of 30, and they literally wasted away like you'd see someone in a concentration camp. Just wasted away. So insulin's important because it actually brings amino acids into the cell. It also brings sugar into the cell. The problem is we are consuming so much sugar, we're driving up our insulin levels, and that's throwing a lot of the sugar into the liver. And after 70 grams of sugar, that liver can't hold anymore. So where does the rest of that sugar go? Well, it gets converted to palmitic acid, which is fat. So then the body will start storing that palmitic acid away. It'll also, once the muscles are filled up, right, the muscles can only hold about 300 grams of sugar. Well, the rest of that now goes into cells and gets stored away as fat. And the body has no problem converting that into fat. So the goal is we want to keep our body insulin sensitive, and we want to only use just as much sugar or carbohydrate as we need, primarily from natural sources, non-starchy sources, or if we're healthier, healthy starchy or low glycemic fruit sources are going to be great, because then we can control our insulin resistance. But a lot of people are insulin resistant, and they're driving so much of their sugar into the fat. They're converting it into fat.
So wait, we shouldn't eat Cheerios for breakfast?
Well, again, if you're insulin resistant, like the majority of the population is, you should primarily be getting your carbohydrate from non-starchy vegetable sources. Again, the more insulin sensitive you are, you can up the carbohydrate, right? You can up the carbs. It's just find balance, because especially if you're exercising, exercise and especially stress will increase cortisol. But insulin actually blunts the effect of cortisol. So we have this nice balance where insulin can drive cortisol down. So if we're exercising hard, we may want to use insulin-stimulating foods to drive down cortisol and to shift our body into becoming more anabolic. Again, a lot of the best bodybuilders, they're not just using steroids, but they're actually injecting in insulin. They're using insulin because insulin's incredibly anabolic, because it puts things into your cell. It drives amino acids into your cell, and it will drive sugar and convert it into fat into your cell. The problem is that we don't have any more reserves for sugar, so all that sugar is just getting converted into fat, and that's the big problem. And with extra insulin, especially for men, you're going to drive a lot of your testosterone. You're going to end up converting it into estrogen via the aromatase enzyme. So once you become more insulin resistant, you upregulate this enzyme called aromatase, and that takes a lot of your testosterone and shuttles it downstream into estrogen. So now you're insulin resistant and you have estrogen, so now you're going to start having man boobs, and you're going to start putting on more and more fat because of how estrogen affects fat storage. It causes you to store more. That's why women have more adipose tissue in the breast area, in the hips and thigh area. It's not just because of, someone being overweight. It's because they have hormonal changes that drive that, and they need that for healthy pregnancy too. Without that extra adipose tissue, there's actually a couple of studies where less adipose tissue in those areas on females, they saw a smaller IQ, I said smaller, a lower IQ in the children that were born to women that had less body fat in certain areas.
Wow, yeah. So it's super important to maintain that balance. So you mentioned the fact about this. It's also, insulin is like a storage hormone, and of course, if you're 257 or 70-pound bodybuilder or athlete, you might have a little bit more storage space in those big muscles for more carbohydrates than a normal individual. And if you have higher sensitivity after you train, eating starchier foods might not necessarily hurt you, but it's funny because we know that after we train, we emptied our storage sites, and that's the perfect time because it's driving it to the muscle. But we wake up in the morning, and it's funny, we take that same analogy and we say, oh, well, they're empty of glucose, so you have to eat sugar in the morning. But it seems like that's not necessarily the case. That, well, it's okay that they're empty. Your body can make new sugars, and it can focus on burning fat while you do that, and have more of a fat burning breakfast. And later on in the day, when you train, you can probably have more carbs. But so what's your take on that viewpoint?
Can you just reiterate can you just crystallize your last statement into one kind of sentence there for me, Barris?
Oh yeah, no problem. I've had some people view the point of eating more of their carbs after they work out. Yeah.
Got it. So yeah, absolutely. So in the morning, we're going to naturally have a higher amount of cortisol. So we're going to have the ability to mobilize amino acids from proteins, right? This is called gluconeogenesis. Really important. If you have a big word in medicine, if you just break it up, you can kind of fret out what it means. Gluco meaning sugar, neo meaning new, genesis meaning forming. So it's forming new sugar, and it's forming it out of protein. And we have 15 amino acids in our body that are gluconeogenic. We can convert them to protein. That's good to know. So off the bat, I recommend anyone trying to have significant weight loss to go very lower carbohydrate, higher fat, and higher protein in the morning. That's important because then we're going to really force our body to tap in to fat for fuel throughout the day, which is important. But on the flip side, cortisol is lower at night, so I recommend having a little bit more of your carbs at night because you're not going to have the cortisol pushing up your blood sugar. So without that blood sugar being pushed up, blood sugar can go low at night, and potentially people may have a hard time or may find themselves waking up at night, and this is because of the fact that their blood sugar is dropping. So having a little bit of carbs with some protein and fat at night, maybe some sweet potato, maybe some squash, maybe just a handful of berries and such, wherever is going to be the best carbohydrate source for you, feel it out and figure out what works best. That tends to help keep that blood sugar in a good normal range. So that's a good recommendation, especially if you're having sleep issues. Now, couple of things here. A lot of people with adrenal fatigue, if they're going too low carb, and I know Jimmy Moore has talked about this on his Twitter and blogs, that he's having a hard time losing weight because his weight's starting to go back up. I postulate with Jimmy there's some cortisol stress-induced issues with him going potentially just too low carb for too long, potentially some adrenal and thyroid problems going on, and potentially increasing the carbs just a little bit may be beneficial for Jimmy, or again, lots of people that are in his position, and or looking at the thyroid and the adrenals and supporting both of those, because too low carb can potentially be a stress response if we're not producing the cortisol to create sugar out of protein. So a little bit of carbs can be helpful, and supporting the thyroid and supporting the adrenals. If you're finding that you're going low carb for a while and you're still not getting the results, you're starting to plateau, start upping the carbs 5 or 10 grams a day. See if you find a spot where you feel good. And then if you're working out, try to have something that's going to be a little bit insulin stimulating after a meal so we can blunt the effects of cortisol. Insulin is wonderful at buffering cortisol, so adding in maybe a little bit of starch, maybe some berries, maybe a quarter or a half a banana with some amino acids, because you want to utilize that insulin and drive those proteins right into the muscle. So doing both will be excellent. So figuring out kind of if your low carb diet is plateauing, this is where it can be good to start dialing up the carbs just a little bit and see what works for you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that was really, really well put. I guess before we start to get closer towards the end, talk about some other supplements that you might think will be beneficial for someone.
Yeah, I know. We kind of ignored some of the supplements today because we've been talking about the physiology, because that's so important. If we ignore that, we're screwed. But supplementation, off the bat, I'm a huge fan of MCT oil. MCT is great. I mean, I use conventional MCT that has primarily C8 and C10 fatty acids. This is capric and caprylic fatty acid. This is really good stuff. Dave Asprey has some good brain octane that I use as well. And I do notice with Dave Asprey's brain octane, it doesn't really stimulate diarrhea like your conventional MCT. So there's something to that. And Dave claims it's the purity factor. It could be that he primarily has, I think, C8 fatty acid, not as much of the C10 like the other MCTs have. So that's a really good product that I recommend adding into your supplement regimen. On top of that, adaptogenic herbs, because if so many people have abnormal cortisol levels, taking a high quality adaptogenic herb can be very helpful at modulating cortisol. So if we have excessive cortisol, this could definitely cause extra fat around the tummy, right? But if we have too low cortisol, we may not be able to create enough energy. And if we're super tired, well, we're not going to be able to recover from exercise because we're going to feel like crap, because our adrenals, remember, exercise is cortisol stimulating. We can do our best to cut down the duration and potentially even the intensity so we make less cortisol, but there's no doubts about it. Cortisol is going to be stimulated through exercise. So we really want to make sure that we can manage that cortisol secretion. And that's why having the right kind of post-workout meal is super helpful at blunting the effects of cortisol, and also choosing the right kind of exercise. So again, if you're going to have problems with fatigue and energy, starting at a very shorter type of duration, maybe a Tabata or even just an interval fast walk to a walk type of thing, can be helpful just to get moving.
Definitely.
Now, another thing, this is pretty good, is exercising in the morning first thing on an empty stomach. Now, not too intense. I don't recommend keeping the workout under a half hour. Is a pretty good rule of thumb if we are working out on an empty stomach. That's really, really important. So I recommend get up, do like a Tabata, do some type of interval. I did sprints this morning, like kind of a walk sprint kind of gig. That's important. Again, that's going to stimulate these GLUT4 receptors. And GLUT4 is pretty cool. They're these little transporter molecules that help pull blood sugar out of our bloodstream and bring it into the muscle. So this is great, because if we have less blood sugar in our bloodstream, well, guess what happens? We need less insulin to bring it into the cell. Less insulin means less insulin resistance, so our body becomes more insulin sensitive. And that's great, because if we're more insulin sensitive, we're less likely to be shuttling that we're much less likely to be shuttling that sugar into our fat cells. And as a guy, we're also going to be less likely of taking that testosterone and shuttling it downstream into our fat cells and making estrogen because of the aromatase enzyme.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I like all of those. And especially, you mentioned training in the morning before you eat, so you're on an empty stomach, so that way you're utilizing and you're mobilizing that fat. And I think that's great. I enjoy doing sometimes even like relaxing stuff like yoga, which is still, some positions are still difficult to get in, and you got your muscles shaking to get in the right position and hold it for a certain time, but it's also could be really refreshing, and even that positive endorphin rush can be so beneficial to you as you start your day, and maybe you're less stressed out in your day, and now you can go ahead and you have a better outlook on your entire day, and you start your day off right.
Yeah, exactly. And then one thing on top of the hormones changes, this is kind of a cruel joke that Mother Nature plays on us as humans, is as men increase aromatization and make more estrogen, women actually increase this enzyme called 1720 lyase, and they produce more testosterone.
Yeah.
And then you start having this whole PCOS sequelae, and PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and most women that have polycystic ovarian syndrome are insulin resistant. You'll see two kinds of women. You'll see the women that are low blood sugar, they're reactive, hypoglycemic, they have very low blood sugar, and they're also a lot of times skinny, but they're also sarcopenic, meaning they have very low muscle mass. They're skinny fat, right? They're skinny fat. And then you have the women that are insulin resistant, and then they'll be on the heavier side. They may have some acne or skin issues, and they may even have just a little bit of peach fuzz, especially along the jawline, or they'll start having more follicles of darker color hair in their facial hair. And that's one of the big things we see. And then that high amount of insulin does a whole bunch of things, right? What it starts to do is it increases prolactin levels. When prolactin starts increasing, that basically screws up a woman's cycle. Prolactin will drive off women's cycles, and they'll start having lots of PMS, and then hormonally they'll feel like crap, and then they'll have sweet cravings, and they eat more crap, and then they're moody, and it's really a vicious cycle because women's hormones are very intricate. I always tell my patients that a man's hormonal cycle is like a foghorn. It's just there. It's just where a woman's cycle, it's like a symphony, right? We got the orchestra coming in. We have FSH, and then LH, and then a rise in estrogen, and a drop in estrogen, and a rise in progesterone, and then a subtle drop in progesterone and estrogen, and then a drop, and then menstruation. And it's this wonderful, beautiful cycle. But again, when you have more moving parts, things get messed up. So the first cog in the wheel that I want to just back up with is insulin. Insulin's going to really mess up this cycle and cause lots of females to then put on extra weight. And that's why one of the first line therapies for this in conventional medicine is metformin or glucophage, which is a insulin sensitizing drug. It causes your liver to stop producing sugar, and it also causes less absorption of sugar in the intestinal tract, which actually long-term can cause B12 problems, which is definitely an issue you want to avoid. If you're on metformin, make sure you're taking the high-quality B12.
Real quick, you said it stops your liver from producing insulin, you mean?
It stops your liver from producing glucose.
Oh, okay, you did mean that. Okay, just making sure. So it's not able to break it down and form glucose.
Yeah, basically your liver produces...
It can't do the neogenesis.
Yeah, it can't produce gluconeogenesis, less of it. So it's it's making the liver make less sugar, and it's also creating the malabsorption of glucose as well. But part of that malabsorption also comes with some malabsorption of B12 too.
Yeah, definitely.
And we need B12 to make healthy red blood cells. So then we're set up in this sequelae of potential fatigue down the road if we're on this drug long term.
Definitely. Sounds good.
So let's
let's get a summary and an action plan real quick.
Yeah. So a couple of things off the bat. Add some MCT, right? Add some MCT in your coffee. That's really important thing. Exercising 10 or 20 minutes on an empty stomach in the morning is going to be really important, right? Add in some high-quality free-form amino acids and or sulfur-based amino acids. That's going to be really important. You can add in things like berberine. Berberine is a specific antimicrobial herb, okay? Nice thing about berberine, it knocks out a lot of bugs in the tummy. Like berberines are like Oregon grape or golden seal or barberry or Chinese coptis, right? These are all herbs that are going to be berberines, but they also show to be very helpful at insulin resistance. So you kind of get two birds with one stone. The berberis are going to be really helpful at helping insulin resistance, but they're also going to knock out a lot of the bad bacteria in the tummy. So use it. Just make sure you follow up with probiotics, high-quality probiotics after you complete it.
Yeah, definitely.
And 2, also add in some high-quality caffeine, either from a good quality coffee source like we talked about, or EGCGs, right? These are epigallocatechins. These are the antioxidant compounds in green tea. These are helpful at increasing free fatty acids. This is another really, really good one. Okay? Also, you can do some natural stimulants. I already mentioned a couple. There's that old one, the ephedrine one, Ma Huang. That's can be very powerful. You got to be careful because it's very stimulating. So if you don't have strong adrenals, it's something that you'd want to pull out. That wouldn't be something that you'd want to have in there all the time. Like I mentioned, cutting out all of the toxins, right? So one of the best things you can do is just a really good medical grade detox with all of the amino acids. That's going to be super, super helpful at getting rid of a lot of the toxins as well. So that's a big one too. Now, there's also insulin sensitizing herbs, right? Chromium's going to be really important, right? Forcemeal or Coleus forcemeal is very helpful with thyroid hormone production. It's also another insulin sensitizer. The adaptogenic herbs, especially ginseng. You can even use ashwagandha, rhodiola. These are really good herbs that are going to help with cortisol modulation. Because if your cortisol is too high, that's going to bring cortisol down. Also, banaba, right? Garcinia extract, cinnamon. These are all going to be really helpful at stimulating the metabolism, but also sensitizing insulin. And then one of my favorites is also L-carnitine. L-carnitine is a specific amino acid compound that shuttles fat into our mitochondria. So L-carnitine is going to be helpful, especially if you're a vegetarian or if you have malabsorption. You're going to need L-carnitine. It basically shovels the fat into the furnace so it can be burnt up.
Yes, definitely agree. I've used I used L-carnitine before, and I've seen beneficial results in myself and with clients. And again, men, make sure we don't forget these are wonderful supplements. And then of course, the sulfur-rich foods are so important. I remember when I first started eating paleo, one of the best things that I did was I would always buy, even though it was just starting out. I wasn't necessarily going in the farmer's market yet, but I remember buying pre-chopped up broccoli, and I was always eating broccoli and cauliflower and asparagus and these very sulfur-rich foods, and it really helped me. It sparked my modeling career.
Yeah, there you go.
It helps.
There you go, man. Barris, I think you're the only male model that I know.
Well, I'm glad you know one then.
And you know what? I want it next time I see you in person. I want to see your Zoolander impression, if you don't mind.
Oh, I got you. I also have a little bit of acting in me, so.
I love it. I love it, Barris. Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all the awesome information that you provided here on the show. Everybody listening, make sure you give us a rating on iTunes. It helps. If any of this resonated with you, or you know someone who would love to hear this, share this with them. And it really helps spread our message. And, ask us a question if you want any more info about the topic. Do you want to add anything else, Dr. Justin?
I just think anyone that's really trying to lose weight here, just remember, if you're having a hard time, especially if you've had longer-term thyroid or adrenal issues, weight loss can take time, especially if you've really fatigued these body systems. So make sure you have the diet right. Make sure you're working with a good functional medicine doctor to support the detoxification process, because sometimes detoxing too soon can cause a healing crisis. And just make sure you're doing a lot of the foundational diet and lifestyle things first before you add any supplements. That's going to be just a waste of money if you're not doing all the other things first. And then once you're doing everything else, pick 1 to 3 of these things that I talked about. Try the adaptogens. Try some of the L-carnitine. Try some of the MCT in your coffee. Add in some of the extra nutrients like L-carnitine, or some of the herbs like Coleus forcemeal, or some of the berberines, and see how that works for you. and just test it and then go back to the drawing board. Just make sure you have the foundations dialed in first before you add some of these cool supplements in the rotation.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Justin. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And you guys, I hope that I kind of wanted to start a new phrase. I realized I didn't have a really good ending. And I was thinking, you know what can I wish to our listeners? I want them to be well. And I said, you know what? Forget that. I don't want them to be well. I want them to be beyond well. So for all the listeners out there, thank you for listening and be beyond well.
Love it, Barris. You're the man.
Have a good one.
You too, Barris.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.